Welcome to the Leadership and Love podcast. We will cover leadership, mindset, personal development, and sales and marketing. You will experience thought-provoking conversations with both nationally and internationally recognized leaders. Our goal is to inspire you and deliver actionable items that you can implement that are going to help you accelerate your growth. Get ready to discover the magic and the power when you lead with love. I'm really excited and truly joyful to have one of the wisest, smartest people I know that's truly an expert on leadership. And also, I'm privileged and humbled to call her a dear friend. So welcome, Sherry.
I'm thrilled. I am so excited to just have a conversation with you. Folks, Lou and I have had many conversations, and I've always come away enriched, smiling, full of laughter, and just appreciative of the time we spend together. So that's what my intention for you people listening. That's my same intention for all of you who are listening today.
Thank you for your kind words, and I've always loved your heart and your passion to help other people. So Sherry stepped into the world as a leader. First in sports, where she attended the highest level possible in athletics, the Olympic Games. Then we're going to talk about that a little bit. She then led college basketball programs for 23 years, where she won a national championship and took her teams to three Elite Eights. Since 2012, as the CEO of the Winning Leadership Company, she has delivered over 3,800 hours of leadership programs where she has developed Olympic-level leaders. Sherry has spoken to audiences as large as 14,000 and has spoken for companies such as Dell, McDonald's, and Adobe. She has spoken in Gillette Stadium, airplane hangars, baseball diamonds, and too many hotel convention centers to mention. Organizations such as Volunteers for America, Anytime Fitness, Edward Jones, and a host of multi-million and billion-dollar companies invest in Sherry's teachings each year. So Sherry, thanks again. I'm truly excited. And you truly have such a wealth of real-world experience and knowledge. So first, I'd like you to share with our audience your Olympic story, how you're kind of going in one direction and then you shifted.
So it's really interesting because, so many times we have this idea of how life should pan out for us. We think, well, if I do X, X, and X, I'll get to X, right? We just have this great plan. We put this plan in place. We got the blueprint. We start working at it. Well, that's what I did. I mean, at the age of 7, I was like, I'm going to be an Olympian. Like I watched it. My parents were watching the Olympics on television. I saw the reactions and they're like, I'm like, I'm going to do that. That's what I want to do. Well, and then literally the next day, you probably remember Jack LaLanne. Like a lot of people wouldn't remember, but I remember
I
Jack.
do. Yeah.
Next morning, TV sets on and me and Jack are doing jumping jacks and all the things that Jack, because I thought I was training. I was full bore, ready to train. And I from there I went on and I really believed that I was going to be an Olympian. There was never a doubt in my mind when I was young. That was the way I was headed. And so I thought the sport was going to be basketball. Unfortunately, when I went through high school, things just started shifting. And part of that, when I look back, part of that was my responsibility, right? Who I was, how I behaved, my belief systems. And I had problems with teammates. Again, I'm taking my part of the responsibility. And then the same thing happened in college. And then my parents were struggling with in their divorce, and they were ugly with each other. Unfortunately, they weren't very kind in their divorce actions, and I was really lost and I didn't know where I was going to go. Started drinking a lot, and things didn't pan out for me in the basketball world. I kept thinking this is the way I'm supposed to do. This is my direction. This is where I'm supposed to end up, and things fell apart in so many different ways. And so I ended up quitting the basketball team when I was in college. And the reason for that is again, this kind of like this problem between me and the team, which again, full responsibility for my part, which was I didn't think people liked me and I didn't like myself. If I didn't think people liked me and I didn't like myself, pretty hard for other people to like me, right?
Right.
So that created a lot of chaos. And the coach took me down the locker room and she literally said to the team, "Tell Sherry what you think about her." And they did. And it was nasty. It was mean. It was mean-spirited. And my self-esteem was so low at that point, I couldn't handle it. So I quit, which then led me to more drinking, right? And fortunately for me, there was a classmate who said, "Look, you should come play this sport called handball." And I go, "I don't even know. I don't like racquetball. This is stupid. I'm not going to do this." She goes, "No, no, no. I'm talking about team handball, which is different. It's like soccer using the hands or water polo on land. Just come. Like we're practicing, just come. So I went to watch this wonderful sport that involved hitting people, and I was like, yes, I'm angry. I get to hit people. This is awesome. I was so excited. Um, that I could take my anger out on other people. But it happened to be a sport that was really fun. And the team was a club team, but they played some other teams, and I played with them. About 2 months in, they said, we're going to go to the national tournament in New York City. Do you want to go? And I'm like, well, I had nothing else to do, had never been to New York City. I'm like, sure. Well, that's where the national tournament was. And look, Louie, I'd only played a couple of months. I didn't know what I was doing. I was athletic enough that the national team coach invited me to start training with a national team, which was training for the 1984 Olympic Games. So it was a really valuable lesson to me, which was, look, if a door shuts, it doesn't mean the dream is over.
Stop, Sherry, say that again. That's, I want everybody to catch what she just said. This is flipping gold. Please repeat that.
Well, if the door is shut, it doesn't mean the dream is over. It just means that you have to shift it a little bit. That the universe, and you can call it source energy, universe, God, that there's a different plan, a better plan than you could have ever imagined. So don't get mad. Like the dream just shifted. So it was wonderful for me to understand that really, truly, everything was going to be okay. It's always going to be okay. Even though we think it's not, it's going to be okay. And that slam door just meant, hey, look at this. This is going to be amazing. And it was.
And you ended up at the Olympics.
I did. I did twice.
And did you medal?
We did not. So you have to imagine, I started playing the sport at age 19. The people I was playing against had played since they were 5. So,
Yeah.
we became competitive and we had a shot at actually winning a medal. Unfortunately, we were one goal away from that. But looking back is like, really what we accomplished in the shorter amount of time, because my teammates were the same way. Nobody started playing when they were young. They all started playing when they were, older. And we had, some phenomenal opportunities there to win a medal. We were just a little short. Still wonderful experience. Didn't change the
Oh,
experience.
without a doubt. And it gives you that title Olympian, right? And that when you think about the number of people in the world, that's pretty rare air. That's
Very
pretty
rare.
rare air to say I'm an Olympian.
Right.
So could you share with our audience the transition of how you did all of that, and then you got into coaching basketball?
Right. Well, the thing about team handball is, and I love the sport, there's just nowhere to coach in the United States. It's a dead end because there's only, there's no competitive teams playing at any level, not high school, not college. There's no competitive teams, and so there's nowhere to coach. And I really always wanted to be a coach. So after I was an athlete, I knew I wanted to coach. So I went back to the sport that I had loved prior to team handball, and I started coaching at a really small college and then just built up to, other colleges and other places to coach. And it was, again, look, I don't think, Louis, that I've ever worked a day in my life because I've always been passionate about what I've done. And it's been so much fun that I never felt like I worked. It was just like, oh, I get to go play again.
Yeah. That's a great thing for our listeners to take in, is that when you're doing what you love, it really isn't work. And if your job, your career, whatever you're doing is work, then you really need to take a long, hard look at what you're doing.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
so Sherry, I'd like to. There's so many things. This could be go in so many directions because you've already. First off, thank you for being so vulnerable and transparent. But this could go in so many different directions. For our audience today, I really want to focus on leadership. So
Right.
when you transitioned into basketball, and you'd had these experiences on basketball teams, what was one of the things that you committed to that you were the kind of leader you were gonna be because of the experience you had in the past?
Well, I think that's so important to know, like Louis, like all these experiences, and people can call them negative. And if you call you're going to live them as negative, but really they're just opportunities for growth, right? Each one of those things that I experienced gave me the understanding of how to be better and how to interact better with people and how to honor the players. So one of the things I really wanted to make sure was that none of my players would ever be bullied. Like that was not going to happen. I was going to protect that player. We were going to have honest conversations. I was going to help that player through whatever was going on in her world so that we could get through that together as an individual, as a team. So that was one of the things that I committed to. I committed to having the tough conversations with people, having the tough conversations with the team, and really finding the unity that we needed to care about each other. And I would use the word love. A lot of players would be like, "Whoa, love," but I mean, it's really that deeper compassion and care that you hold together, and that is love. Compassion is love. So that was one of the things that taught me was, look, I'm not going to let any player be bullied or be pushed out of the circle or feel like they don't belong to the team. We're going to deal with it. We're going to find a way through it, first for the benefit of the individual, but also for the benefit of the team. Like, it hurts the team when we do that to somebody.
Right. I think that, so again, for our listeners, she just hit two things out of the park in a couple of sentences. One of them is that everything that she went through, she looked back on it, and sometimes it's hard in the middle of it, right? But at some point, you have the ability to look back on it and reflect and say, okay, what do I need to do differently? She also was smart enough to turn that into something that she added to her leadership style, which really changed the game. And I want to say this, and I think this is very powerful because I'm all about the love. And one of the things Sherry and I share is this friendship, and we love each other, but there's no sex, there's no romance. It's that compassion, it's that understanding, it's the forgiveness that you had because you had been treated that way, that you now gave to your players. And could you talk a little bit about, because I want people to understand how powerful this is, because you are not only being this amazing leader in this space where, especially with young people, where they need it more, right?
Right.
When there's a person like you in their life that's been successful, and you tell them, hey, you can do this, or you're smart, or you're
Right.
talented, it's really pouring into people, and you are doing that with love. Could you just share, and I know you're humble and modest, but please share some of the success you had, because you ended up being a nationally renowned
Yeah.
basketball coach.
Well, I mean, yeah, the success, I think, when we talk about success, Louis, it's so funny because people say, what was your favorite moment like as a coach? And everybody thinks it's going to be like winning the national championship, and it's not. The favorite moment, and I can recount, some of them would be when a player made a huge shift in who she was from those conversations. Because when you love somebody, that doesn't mean that you give them freedom to just go and wander around and do whatever the heck they want to. Love means I care so much about you that we're going to have these conversations about how you're behaving and what you're doing to yourself, right? So when you hold people in that kind of accountability, that means love. And people don't understand that, but that means love. And so, when I see people, like I had a young lady who, for example, was really quiet, uh, very fearful, had a lot of self-doubt, and she started out being an elementary teacher. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's beautiful. That's not who she wanted to be, though. She didn't feel like she was smart enough. She's a 4.0 student. She didn't feel like she was smart enough to be a physician's assistant. And so her senior year, she's like, Coach, I never wanted to be this. I said, well, what do you want to be? And she said, well, I wanted to be this. I wanted to be a physician's assistant. I said, well, help me understand why you didn't do that. She goes, well, I'm just not smart enough. I was like, all right, let's talk. Let's talk about this. You know, and, and she grew a lot in those 4 years. I mean, she grew from a quiet person to a better leader, to more confident, the way she played, the way she carried herself. And she also recognized that when she left college, even though she did get that first degree, she went back to school and became a physician's assistant. Now, folks, that's a story. Like, that's one of the stories that I hold dear to my heart, because you get to see somebody who grew a lot and who found that wonderful piece of confidence that went on to achieve things. And so when we're talking about like moments of a career that makes you successful, I think about all those moments, times the number of players that I had. Not everybody came full circle, but certainly there's people that reached out to me 15 years later, 20 years later, whatever, and said, Coach, man, I really appreciate you. I appreciate the lesson you taught me. I want you to know where I am today. Those are the success stories that you have as a leader.
That's touching, Sherry. Yeah, that's just so touching. It warms my heart, that's going to bring me to my next question. And I'd like you to talk about this because I think I call it the downstream. So all these lives that you've touched and this is true of all of us, right? People don't understand you don't have to be a nationally renowned and successful basketball coach. We are touching lives all day, every day, right? And all of us are leaders. But one of the things I'd like you to talk about is letting go of the downstream, right? So we'll just take the example you shared with the young woman who turned into being a physician's assistant instead of an educator, a school teacher. What do you do, or what would your advice be to leaders to not be so concerned about that outcome? Because that downstream, you don't know how many lives she's helped or healed. And I think that's the beauty of what we do. We just give it and then let it go be what it's supposed to go be. Can you talk about that?
Well, that's given a gift. So this is the challenge that a lot of leaders have, and I had it early in my career, is when you give somebody a gift, and that's like you're coaching them, you're giving them opportunities, whatever you want to call it, the gift of coaching, that's a gift. And so a gift means that when you give a gift, your part in it is done. That's your part. How they use it is their part. And so a lot of people get upset, and I did as a young coach. I'd be like, man, I'm giving these people so much information, so many opportunities, and they're not using it. And then I'd be mad at them for not using it. And then I realized that it's a gift. And when you give a gift, your giving is done. Then they have to decide if they're going to use part of it, none of it, all of it. That's their decision. My part is in the gift, is in giving. That's my part, and it ends there, right? So you have to understand that's what a gift is. A gift is given without expectation of return. That's what a gift is. If you have an expectation of return, it's not a gift, it's a bargaining chip. So you have to realize what you're doing, right?
So that, again, for our audience, this is gold, gold, gold. I can tell you that Sherry, one of the reasons why I love you, and so that gift, and I'd like to reiterate what she said. That gift, if you're expecting something back, then it's a bargaining chip. It's not a gift, and that's what most people do with love.
Yeah.
I love you if I love you, but right. That's
Love you
not
when.
unconditional. Right. I love you when exactly, and that's not a gift. It's just a bargaining chip. And then it becomes tit for tat, and then it becomes some sort of competitive relationship. So I'd like to kind of morph into now, and it's amazing to me. You're just such a fun, down to earth, humble human. And I mean that sincerely. To your point, we've had great conversations over the couple of years that we've known each other, and they're so interactive. But you've risen to be a nationally renowned and regarded and highly respected speaker, trainer that goes into these organizations and really truly morphs that. So I'd like you to talk about what's one of the things that you think is the most important when you go into an organization or somebody's hired you to do a keynote speech that you always think is critical, that's included in that for a leader to grow.
Yeah. So my biggest thing, and I've written about this in a couple of books already, putting out another book soon in April, is self-awareness. Because without that, your potential for growth is almost zero, right? And so it's the ability to look at yourself honestly and being vulnerable, and also with that internal look is not to be angry at yourself. It's like that self-awareness that says, oh, here's what I need to improve. Here's my weaknesses. Here's what I'm not doing well. And at that same time, give yourself grace. So what most people do when they start the journey of self-awareness is they start recognizing who they are, how they show up in the world, and then they start beating themselves up. That's not helpful. That's not the space you want to be in. And so it's really talking to people about the biggest way to grow, which means your biggest impact is through you learning more about you, how you show up in the world. What are your thoughts that you're thinking that make you show up as that person, as that individual, without being mad at yourself? Taking responsibility with true compassion, which is self-love. Like we talk about self-love, But when people start on this journey, Louis, and I did it when I was younger, is I started recognizing who I really was. I was like, oh my gosh. And then I turned to hate, like more self-hatred. That is not a good part of the journey. So, everywhere I go, there's always elements of this self-awareness piece. Maybe I don't call it self-awareness, but it's always elements of asking people to stop and self-reflect so they get a deeper insight into who they are. And that's the moment where epiphanies happen. That's the moment where they get an opportunity right there in that moment to go, oh, that's me.
Right. Yeah, and I would agree with that. I think that it's 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 a challenge, right? It's funny because I think we all go through that. I know I went through that when I first started becoming aware of who I was being and what I was doing. And the thing that my big epiphany was like, well, all these relationships are messed up. Who's the common denominator? The guy in the mirror, right? The guy I see every morning when I brush my teeth. Hello, I could have had a V8. And so let's go down this road for a little bit. So what do you share with audiences and these leaders, CEOs, C-suite executives when you go in? What do you share with them or teach them on how to become self-aware? Because I want you to know I'm in 100% alignment. I tell people once you become self-aware, you're about 65% of the way there, right? Because now you're aware of what the hell's going on, who you're being. And that's what who are you being and who do you want to be? But how do you share with leaders on how to start to become self-aware?
Well, I do have some piece, like, there is, depending on what kind of, if it's a keynote, it's a little bit different, right? But if it's a workshop, I do have some papers that ask you questions about self-awareness so that you can go down and start looking at, what does it mean to be self-aware? Because Louis, if you ask people if they're self-aware, most people are going to say, yes, yes, of course I am.
Right.
Because they don't know better. Like I would have said the same thing. I would have said, yes, of course I'm like, yes, like I think about things, of course. So that's one of the ways, but also one of the things I love to do is literally just have people stand up. Like I will say to people this, finish this quote for me. Quit taking it. And then the people, almost everybody in the crowd will say personally. Okay, great. So you all know the quote. Yep, yep, yep. I said, okay. So I get that. So I want you to raise your hand. How many of you here have ever allowed what somebody else has said to you ruin an hour of your day? 100%. Yeah, 100% of people are going to raise their hands. So if you say you know the quote, but you're not living it, you're not living the idea. So what's that gap mean? What's the gap between knowing, like knowing, I know the quote, and living it? What's that gap? And then to help them understand, like quit taking it personal, I'll have everybody stand up and I have 10 statements I read. And I will say, if you've done this in the last 6 months, then sit down. And Louis, like I get to the fifth one, everybody's seated, right? And so now that makes them aware that they're actually taking things personally. And that helps them become aware. Now, occasionally I have like somebody, one or two people standing up, and I'm like, yeah, you're the ones who are not self-aware because nobody should be able to get through this, right?
Right, right.
So, one of the questions I would say would be like, um, one of the things I would say is if you've allowed a stranger who said something to you have an impact on your emotions, right? And people go, oh no, I don't do that. Well, I still do it. I taught myself out of it pretty quickly. But let's say somebody turns around and says F you, and I'm like, like I'll take offense, and I'm like, wait a second, that's not about me, that's about them. Like that, it has nothing to do with me, right?
So wait, say that again real quick. It's not
It,
about
it's not about me, it's about them. Right? It's not about me, it's about you. It's a mantra I teach. It's not about me, it's not about me, it's about you. You don't say that out loud. You don't say that out loud to the person.
right, right, right. But
Sure.
you're absolutely right. And so I'd like you to talk about it's not about you. And so I'd like to inject this real quick because one of the things I share with people is the world's giving us feedback all the time, right? A good mentor and buddy of mine, he calls it feed forward. But I like to share if somebody tells you you're a horse, they're probably out of their mind. If a couple people tell you you're a horse, there could be a conspiracy at hand. If 10 or 15 people tell you you're a horse, it's time to go buy a saddle, right? So, and so if the world's giving you the same information over and over again, you can continue to push it away and say the whole world's crazy, or you
Right.
can start to ask some of these questions.
Right.
So when you talk about that, I'd like you to go a little deeper in.
Sure.
It's not about you, it's about them.
Right.
What do you mean by that? So the audience understands how they can apply this in their lives.
Well, the first thing I say, when somebody's coming at you and they're demeaning, demoralizing, and destructive, so I always preface it with that. If they're demeaning, demoralizing, and destructive, then it's not about you, it's about them. And what that means is you have to remember that somebody can only speak from their own lifetime of experiences is the only place they can speak from. They cannot speak from that which they do not know. So you have to remember that all of us, without exception, go through challenges. There's nobody on this earth that escapes challenges. It is the process of being human.
So I want to stop you. Can you hold your thought?
Sure.
People, I want to repeat what you said. People cannot do what they don't know. They can only live the experience they've had until they've had a better experience. So that's why you don't take it personally. But please go on. That's another golden nugget there.
So you got to imagine all these challenges that we go through in a lifetime, and we're going to have a ton of them. I mean, it's not one, it's not two, it's like 50, 60. I mean, the number is astounding, really, when you think about the challenges that we go through. So we're going to have a major challenge every 12 to 16 months. And then we're going to have these life quakes, what I call a life quake that I read from a book by Bruce Freely. But a life quake is the lifelong dream that blows up in your face. It's the injury or illness that alters your life forever. It's the loved one that betrays you in such a way that seems unforgivable. You're gonna have like 3 to 5 of those as well. So by the time you meet somebody, they've gone through some of this adversity. And some people get better because they've read books, they've had mentors, they've had coaches, they've gone to webinars, whatever. And other people get bitter.
So repeat that. People get better because
Well, because of what they've done. So they've had coaches, they've had mentors, they've read books, they've attended workshops. I mean, they've done the work, right? They've done work to understand that that moment was an opportunity versus being mad at it. Whereas other people get bitter. Now, when you meet somebody who's demeaning, demoralizing, and destructive, they're bitter. And all they're doing is throwing their bitterness onto you. That's what that means. And the mistake that we make is we let their story become our story. And that's when we get upset. That's when we get sad. That's when we get mad. And it's not about us. It never was about us. It's about the person that's speaking to us, right? And when we understand that, like to me, I'm able to, when people are being that way, I just start my mantra. It's not about me, it's about you. It's not about me, it's about you, until I remember the truth of it. And I remember the other thing that's really huge. If they knew better, they'd do better. And the reason they're not doing better is they don't know better.
Yeah, Jack Canfield said something that's kind of my mantra. Everybody's doing the best they can with what they know, where they're at. If they knew something better, they'd do something better, but they don't. I'd also like you to talk a little bit about one of the things that I become aware of is whatever you're doing, the only way it's ever going to trigger me if it's still alive in me. Can you talk about that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Nobody can hurt you without your permission, right? That's the second part to this. And people will go, well, I don't want anybody to hurt me, so I wouldn't tell them to hurt me. I'm like, no. What that means is when somebody says something and the moment that you get defensive, right? So if somebody were to say something to me, Louie, I didn't agree with. So like they said, look, your eyes are really ugly, and an ugly green or whatever. I'll be like, they're blue. So I don't know, like whatever. And I don't even take offense to it because it's nothing that's true. I'm like, and I don't believe it. But let's say that somebody said to me, you're stupid, and I get defensive. So that's the first thing that you understand. The moment you get defensive, what that means is you believe what they're telling you is true. It's not that they said it that hurt you. What hurts you is you believe it to be true. That's the moment you get defensive. And the second thing you do is you start trying to prove it's not true. So you start trying to say, hey, Louie, this isn't true. Is it, hey, mom, it's not true. You start looking for, that proof that it's not true. What that means is all they did was tap into a wound that you have. So you have a wound that could be at age 6 or 16 or 26 or whatever that's never been completely healed. And what that person is doing is they're tapping into that wound. And when they tap into the wound, you get defensive. Well, look, if it wasn't there, what they said wouldn't hurt you. It's that some part of you agrees with what they said. That's what hurts you. So when you learn to be curious, this is the point of curiosity. Somebody says something, I get defensive. I'm like, ooh, okay. Let me explore why. I agreed with that. What part of me, what story did I have in my youth or younger now, whatever that is? What story did I have that still hasn't been healed so that when they tap into it, I go directly to the wound and I get upset? Because if you heal that wound, not if, well, I guess if, I say when because I'm going to heal it, right? When you heal the wound, it goes away. And then no matter what they say, you can let it go because you're no longer
So,
giving permission.
so I want to touch. So Sherry just modeled something that I very, very rarely see. Sherry just modeled something hugely powerful, and she's living what she's sharing with us. She just caught herself saying if and when in that sentence, and she didn't want her mind to hear if she could heal it. She wanted her mind to hear when I heal it, right? What she was referring to is it's that person's choice if they're going to heal it. But Sherry's moved past that choice, and her mind is aware, and she caught herself because she doesn't want her mind to say when,
Yep.
or she wants her mind to hear when, not
Right.
if I'm going to heal it.
Right.
So when, and I'm sorry, thank you for letting me interrupt you because
No, this is great.
you're brilliant. I mean, seriously, you're dropping brilliant wisdom. So what would you suggest to our listeners to, so that when they've got to the point where they're aware, I've realized it's triggered my stuff, right? It's not about the world, it's my stuff, and I'm going to take responsibility for my stuff. Like you said earlier with these relationships, these basketball players, I'm going to take responsibility for my role in this. How would you recommend they start healing whatever that wound is?
Well, the first thing is you kind of have to figure out what the wound is, right? So, for example, the whole thing about me being stupid. Look, I was a 4.0 student. I was an academic All-American. I was a valedictorian. So you would think initially, like, well, that's silly that you would be upset about that. So I'd have to ask myself, what story caused me to believe that I was stupid, that I'm still holding on to? Well, that goes all the way back to third grade. So in third grade, they were going to hold me back a grade because I couldn't read at the third grade level. They were going to put me in a remedial reading class. Well, remedial to me meant stupid. They never used the word stupid, but I knew that that's what it meant. And I couldn't let that happen because my dad was superintendent of schools. My mom was a teacher and a coach. It was like, I can't be seen as stupid. So that was the story, right? The story of me thinking I was stupid and then carrying that story forth for, I mean, even though I had straight A's, the reason I had straight A's is because I thought that I had to work harder than anybody else in the world to get them, that I wasn't really smart, I was stupid. So even though I was proving to myself that I wasn't, I still held the story, right? And
Right.
so I had to go back and heal the story. I had to go back and really look at the story. And how do I heal the story? Well, first I had to forgive myself for carrying it for so long, right? I
Right.
mean, come
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
How many
Yeah.
decades do you need to carry a story?
Yeah. Exactly.
But then, really looking into it, like, look, I had proved that even though I had a problem with reading, I was so smart that I overcame it. Right? I mean, I had
Right.
to relook at that and understand that the old story was not true. It was a story that I chose to have. And the truth of it was, how smart did I have to be to overcome that reading problem that I had to be able to read and write books now, read, read, volumes of books, tons of books over my lifetime, and then learn to write books. So really, it wasn't I was stupid. It was just a little bit of a challenge and how smart I was to overcome the challenge without help. Like nobody came to me and said, "Let's help you with reading." Like nobody did that. I did it on my own.
And that's powerful. And one of the things that I've come to understand is, to your point, when we get defensive on either side of the relationship, we've gone to our emotional brain, and the best thing you can do is walk away from that situation, right? Because if you get emotional, I can't reason with you, right? That's out the window. That's not an option. So I'd like you to talk about how. I love it when I say something, you get a big grin. But I'd like you to talk about how um, you teach leaders how to handle that situation, because what you're talking about in this emotional baggage, some people call it, our story, however you want to label it, we need to take responsibility for that. How do you coach leaders into handling that in the day-to-day situation and interactions?
Well, you just said it, Louis, which was you need to take a pause, right? So when you feel yourself getting emotional, you know you're no longer thinking logically. You are now, your emotional brain, your lizard brain, whatever they want to call it's taking over. So your past experiences are taking over, and you can't have the conversation at the moment. So the best thing to do is say, hey, like I would say, hey, Louis, you know, this is probably not the best time for me to have this conversation. I need to take a little break to think about this so I come back to you in the best space I can possibly come back to you at. And then we can have the conversation. Can we do this tomorrow at 9 a.m. or can we do this, later this day at 5 p.m.? Always give them a time and a date. Hold that to be true. Then you got to go work on it. Like you got to walk away and kind of figure out like what triggered me. What was it that was said that triggered me? Now I've got to figure out from that trigger, how do I let it go? And so there's all kinds of techniques. I can't, teach all kinds of techniques that I do, right? There's tons of them out there that you can let something go. But it's really like you got to figure out what was it? What was it? And then in your technique, whatever that is for you, for a forgiveness, what that looks like for you. And forgiveness is not like, I forgive them. Like, no, you didn't. That's not a forgiveness. But you got to do something, like Ho'oponopono is one of the things I do, which is a Hawaiian prayer, which is very simple, right? 4 parts. So I'll give the audience right now just a really simple way to do it, which is it's 4 parts. I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, I love you. That's the 4 parts of that. So let's say I got triggered by something.
I'm sorry, real quick. I practice that. And I've added, I'm so, so sorry, right?
Oh, cool.
I've really doubled down I'm sorry, it wasn't who I wanted to be, but please go on. It's because
Well,
it's,
you can, yeah.
and let me share with the audience. Sometimes we think that the solution's got to be some complicated, really convoluted, hard thing that we have to do. And Sherry's going to give you 4 sentences that you could practice right now today. So please repeat it and go on.
I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, I love you. And so people are like, well, you have to say that to the person. I'm like, no, you don't have to say that to the person. You say it to yourself. You could say it to the person, like not face to face. You could say it to them from where you're sitting right here, right now, as if you're talking to them. I think there's 3 parts of this prayer that I've experienced that really changes it, Louis. One is I'm going to say it to the other person, like soul to soul, right? Soul to soul. I'm going to say it about me, my part in it, to me, and then I'm going to say it to the higher power, because there's three parts I think that we
Oh,
can get
you
to that
you just
level.
gave me chills up my back.
Yeah, there's three parts.
That's yeah.
So if
Yeah,
I
that's
said, yeah, if I was in a situation that I could say something like this to, well, let's say I have a neighbor who's not very nice. And I know probably he's not very nice because of the experiences he had when he was a child. I don't know what those were, but I'm sure that he's still holding on to stuff. And so let's say I would say to him, I'm so sorry, I don't understand where you're coming from. Please forgive me for not taking into account like all the challenges that you've had to this point. Thank you, thank you, thank you for giving me this experience of learning once again the power of understanding. And I love you. So that would be like the soul to soul. So I'm not talking to him, but I'm talking to his higher soul, right? And then for me, it might be, I'm so sorry that I got reactive. Please forgive me for how I showed up in this conversation. Thank you, thank you, thank you for giving me the opportunity to see once again that there's a different way to handle something. And I love you. So that way I was talking to me, right? So that was talking to me. Now for the higher power, I might say something like, I'm so sorry that I've had this lesson 50,000 times. Please forgive me for having to learn it one more time. Thank you, thank you, thank you for ever ending grace, and I love you. So there's 3 different ways to go into that, and you do it whatever way it feels good, or maybe all 3 ways, but it softens that whole experience, and now you're ready to go back to have a conversation.
and I would like so I love your heart. I truly love your heart because one of the things that I think that what you just shared, I want our audience to catch is you open when you do these kinds of things and you talk about things like gratitude, thank you, love, I love you. you open your heart and your mind to infiniteness of possibilities that you would have never imagined or never thought of. I could, and so let's go down this road just a little bit. And again, this is for leaders because it's so powerful. I'd like you to share some things that you've created in your life or that have come to you, because one of the things I'm aware of is inspiration comes to all of us. How often it comes is directly related to how fast you act on it. But could you share with the audience some things that have come to you because you've been working on this thing called forgiveness, gratitude, and love that you've created that's made the world a better place?
Well, I would start with my family because I think our family is the biggest place where we struggle the most. I think those relationships with families are the biggest place. So when my grandmother passed away, I can remember walking into the room and my mom not sitting close to her, but sitting far away. They didn't have a good relationship, sitting far away at the door. And my grandmother had not been responsive, had really not had any conversations with anybody. And I flew in, I was living in West Virginia. I flew in from West Virginia, and my sister walks into my grandmother's bed and she goes, Granny, Sherry just flew in to come see you. And she literally opened her eyes and she goes, What'd you do? Fly in on a broom? That's what she said to me. And so that was my typical grandmother. And I thought it was funny, hysterical. Now my mother gets so mad. What, she's gonna talk to you? She don't even talk to me. I've been here for days. And I was like, ooh, I don't want that to be my relationship with my mom. And so even though my mother and I have experienced some very challenging, early on life experiences, I made the decision right then. I was like, I am not going to have this relationship with my mom. I'm going to forgive her and I'm going to love her. I'm going to love my mother. And so because I made that decision, we've had a much better relationship. I've learned to love her no matter what or who she shows up as. And it changes the family dynamics, right? When you can show up and love your mother. Because I'm like, I'm not going to be the person when she dies that I'm going to sit over by that door and be mad at her. I'm going to have done all the work to have loved her right here, right now. So that's one of the things that really, like when we can shift that, it shifts the family dynamics, not just my relationship with my mother, but it shifted my sister's relationship with her too. And it gave us a better opportunity to have an experience of closeness that we would not have experienced. And I think that that's the work that we do, right? And the work I do, like I did with my neighbor, who sued me over something ridiculous and cost me lots of money. Um, but why would I be angry at him every day? Why would I be angry at him? I wouldn't want to be angry at him every day because that doesn't live in him, it lives in me, right? And so it's those kind of things that can really change your life, how you show up. Like I want to show up as a person who can find the good in everybody, who can bring more light and love in the world. That's how I want to show up. I can't show up as that person being angry and with unforgiveness in my heart, right?
Right. That's very true. One of my favorite quotes that you just touched on is when you're busy hating someone, it's like eating a jar of poison, expecting it to kill the other person, right? The only person you're really hurting is you. I'd like you to touch on something that you just hit, but I'd like you to, for the audience to really grasp it, how you do that everywhere in your life, because we both know how you do one thing is how you're doing everything.
Right.
How powerful is that to take that attitude you had with your mom and use that
Mhm.
in a team
Yeah.
in those, because I agree with you completely. Our biggest opportunity for growth is in those closest personal relationships, because nobody can push those buttons and trigger us like the people that know us best, right? Because they've been doing it for a long time, especially our parents and our siblings.
Right.
But I'd like you to talk about how important that is to do it everywhere else, and also the importance of boundaries as a leader, because at some point you can love them. People I think get this messed up in their head, where you can love somebody but you don't spend time with them anymore, or you can love somebody but you don't
Right.
let them allow them to do whatever they've been
Oh,
doing that was
absolutely.
hurting you or really destructive to the relationships. Can you talk about that a little bit, please?
100%. 100%. I think that when people think of love, they think it's like, I mean, you talked about like sex and romance before, and they think of like that continual, like you have to show up for them every day. No, 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 no. Sometimes the biggest love that you can have is allowing somebody else to be who they are because they have free will, like you have free will, allowing somebody else to be who they are, which means that maybe you can't be around them because they're making choices that are not positive choices for them. because we can't change anybody anyway. It's not our power. We don't have that power. You still love them and you're sending them love and energy. You just can't be in their presence because it's so toxic, right? It doesn't, but you're loving them. I mean, you're not hate. There's no hatred. You have compassion for where they are. You're hoping, you're sending them positive energy. You just can't be there because it's too hard. It's too hard on you to be in the presence of that toxicity, right? So there's that kind of love that we have. And so I think, when I work with teams, it's about having compassion for that person where they are right now. It doesn't mean that it's allowed that they're allowed to show up that way. So let's make sure we understand that. So a greatest love for somebody on a team might be that you decide to terminate them after having conversations, giving them opportunity to grow, right? It might be the biggest love you have is to say, you know what? It's the time for you to understand. We've had conversations. I've given you options. We've worked on some personal improvement plans. You haven't taken the opportunity to move forward. So now it's time for you to move on. And in doing so, you might be giving them the best opportunity for them to learn the biggest lesson they need to learn. It's not from hatred you're doing it. You're doing it from complete love, you know, so that they have the opportunity to recognize what they're doing to themselves and to the team.
And so that's powerful because it links, again, I want the audience to catch this. That links back to what you said. You just give the gift, right? You don't jump the gun. You give them the gift. You give them the gift of coaching. You give them the gift of your wisdom, your knowledge, your experience, the things that you've used, habits, processes that have helped people in the past. And then at that point, it's their deal. And sometimes you come to that crossroads where it's time to go on. I love I'm a big fan of John Wooden. And
Yeah.
I've read a bunch of stuff about him and read some of his own books. And one of the things that he would do is when he would terminate, I just let somebody go in one of my organizations because to your point, they really want to have their own business. And I told them, you're not a fit here, but I'll help you. I help mentor people all the time to grow their business, improve their business. I said, I'll be able to help. I'm happy to help you. And John Wooden used to, he would take a player that was trying to make the team and he'd say, hey, I'm going to introduce you to the swim coach because I can see you got some skills, but they're probably going to be better in the pool than they are on a basketball court.
Right.
But that's that gift. And whether he goes and sees the swim coach or not, or whether they learn the lesson, because like you said, I'm in the same school that you are in. There's things I went, thousands of times over and over and over and over before. Duh, Louie, it's you. You were doing this. You were saying this. You were thinking this. You created this thing every flipping time. But you'd get angry and blame the world.
Right.
And so this is such a rich conversation. One of the things I'd like you to share at this point is what's one of the things that you would share with leaders on how to be a strong, loving leader for their team.
Well, the greatest gift you can give yourself and give your team is to love yourself more, right? That's the greatest gift you can ever give. And so that means, again, we talked a little bit, I said this before, but getting a coach that can help you get there, or getting a mentor, or, if you reading books, you can certainly read books. I've written books, you've written books, reading a book, listen to podcasts. You have to retrain. This is the hard part for people. You have to retrain your thought habits that you've developed over decades. And it's not simple. That's not an easy task. It's worth it. It is well worth it to retrain your brain. So a lot of us grow up in situations where we're taught we're unworthy, or we're failures, or we're not good enough, and all kinds of messages that come our way. And when we believe those messages, it's going to impact the way that we treat other people. It's a must. It's a must. Like the way that I became better as a coach was I invested in myself. I invested in my personal growth, right? And so that's, first it was reading and watching videos, and then it became getting coaches, and it's that ongoingness of talking to people like you, Louie, who you grow me every time we talk. I mean, it's really being around those kind of people that help us move a different direction. And so if you're a leader and you haven't invested yet in a coach, I would highly suggest, whether it's me, Louie, or somebody else, it doesn't really matter, is really investing in a good coach to help you on your journey.
Yeah, that's really profound, wise advice. And one of the things I'd share with the audience is that I tell people all the time, never work with a coach that doesn't have a coach. right? Because at some point you're going to get into these conversations and you're going to be helping your coach, or the coach is going to have personal problems. But I think that's profound advice, because somebody sees your life from a different perspective than you do, because you're in the middle of it. You're in the middle of that emotion. You're in the middle of the day-to-day interactions and reactions of what's going on. So I want to tap into this for a minute. What's one of the things that you share with leaders on a way they can start practicing self-love? Because I'm a huge advocate of it as well.
Well, so, man, I think that the first thing I just said to you is invest in yourself. So how do you do that? I mean, it could be, I spend the first 45 minutes of every day investing in myself. And what does that mean? That means, I go down to my basement where it's really quiet and I do several things. Number one is I write my intentions down for the day. So an intention is different than a goal. So a goal is like how much money I'm going to make, how many calls I'm going to make, blah, blah, blah. An intention is like today, one of my intentions was I'm going to look for abundance everywhere. So when I look outside, it's like, oh my gosh, look, there's clouds that just stretch for everywhere, right? Or look at that
Right.
sunshine. It's in every mountain peak that I can see. So looking for that's an intention. Then I write down gratitude statements. So 5 things I'm super grateful for, right? And then I write down something I'm grateful for my body, because one of my biggest challenges is that I have had an autoimmune disease which affects my health. And so I like to judge my body. And so I have to really work at looking at my body and being loving and kind to it. And then I
Yes.
write down a miracle, Louis, that I've experienced or somebody else has experienced. Because the more you believe in miracles, the more they show up. And so when I write one down, I'm like, oh my gosh, I just talked to this person. They told me how they, overcame this and this and this. It's a miracle. So I do that. I read something positive or listen to something positive, and then I meditate. I am investing in me in the morning. Like I am filling my cup before I start the day with everybody else. I think that's critical for everybody to do. Invest in yourself, because that's the way you get greater self-love, right? And I have to work on it. Like I said, I judge my body. It doesn't work like I want it to work. I judge it. Well, that's not like my body is like part of every cell is has its own intelligence, right? And I'm telling it, I don't like you. Well, how's it going to show up?
Right. Well, so I want to touch on something. So she's talking about her morning routine. This doesn't take money. It just takes her concern and consideration to make it a priority,
Right.
right? You do it on a regular day. I want to share something with you so our audience grasps the power of 2 things that just intersected. And we're doing this off the cuff because we're busy living it, so it's not hard for us to discuss it. We don't have to think about this because we've done it over and over. One of the things I do when I write my gratitude, I write things that I'm thankful for that haven't manifested yet. So every morning, I'm writing thank you for the miracles, the opportunities, and the abundance that I'm going to find in this day.
Oh,
And one of
I'm
the
going to
things
do that. I'm going to do that. You just gave me something new. Yay.
And so, because to your point, and let's talk about this for leaders, because we're in leadership and mindset and personal development, and they're all connected, right? I've got 4 pillars for this, and I asked you and you wanted to go down leadership, but this is truly how we lead ourselves, is with personal development, is with changing our mindset, right? But it's a daily practice, it's a habit, and isn't that what is so important? And I'd like you to talk about that, on how just little things every day, at the end of a month, at the end of a year, it's huge.
Yeah. Yeah. I have this coaching client who, um, it's a young girl. So she's only 22. And most of my clients are CEOs, CFOs, COO. I mean, the CEOs, right? The people in the C-suite. But her parents met me and wanted me to coach her. I said, sure. Uh, Her willingness to go down this path of self-development has been incredible, Louis. I mean, just the beauty. Like she's worked with me for over a year, and we started out, and she had no self-confidence, no self-esteem. She thought she was unworthy. I mean, she's beautiful, beautiful young woman, golfer. And she said the most incredible thing to me the other day. You're going to get this. Some people might not. She ended up last place in a golf tournament, like last. And she called me and she goes, "It was the worst I've ever played in my life." This is after working with me, right? And we've had some
Yeah.
great successes. Like she's really gotten better at great success, but this was not one of them. And here's what she said to me. She said, it was the worst I've ever played. And she goes, "Ann, that golf tournament does not define me. I am worthy."
Yes.
Wow. And I was like in tears. I was like, "Oh my gosh. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow."
Yeah.
And so, of course, what did she do the next time? She played better, right? Because she didn't let that tournament decide for her who she was. She reached for worthiness. And if I can tell people out there, like some of you might not get that, but the power of that to move forward, to find better things, incredible, incredible. And so that's what I think they want to talk about. Like, if you do something and you keep working at it, that's where you'll end up. That's the
Well,
place you're gonna end up. Like,
and,
even
and
if something
so
goes bad, you're still happy. You're still in love with yourself.
And so I can tell you, you put tears in my eyes and again warm my heart. I was beaten bloody by a stepmother who told me I was useless and I was never going to amount to anything, and she couldn't wait till I got out of the house. And I want to, for our audience, I don't tell you that for sympathy. I tell you that because I started thinking different thoughts, and I believe those thoughts for decades. Right? I think this is so important. Why we have to go back to the youth and get them before they have decades and decades of this message that we repeat in our head over and over, and then we buy into it,
Yep.
right? And then we think it's the truth, and it's not the truth. It's the furthest thing from the truth.
Of
Sherry,
course.
we could go on for days, my friend, but I'd like to ask you, I like to usually end with two questions. One is, if there was one book you could recommend to the audience, what would be one book? For those
My
for
book.
those of you that are listening and not watching, she just held up her book. Hold that up again so I can read
It's,
it's called Winning Leadership: 7 Secrets to Being a Truly Great, Powerful Leader.
there you go.
So so okay, so that answers my first question. My second question is, tell tell us what you love the most about your work that you do now. Your keynote speaking, your workshops, when you're going into these organizations and you're really creating this great transformation. What do you love most about it?
Well, the ability to offer gifts to people, so the ability to influence and impact. And so, you know, sometimes people will come out and nobody has received anything, and maybe they need that's the first seed they've ever had planted. But really, the opportunity to share with folks what I've spent decades in learning, and when that light bulb comes on or that change in their life comes, it wasn't because of me, but I was part of the seed planting. I was part of the gift giving that helped people get there. And I see so much sadness and anger and depression and fear in the world. And if I can just erase a little bit, if I can just help somebody else erase it a little bit, that's powerful stuff.
Amen, sister. It's a drop in the bucket, headed in the right direction. I couldn't agree more. I want to stress a couple things for our audience before we go. Sherry and I have had many conversations, and there's great power in asking questions. I've learned a bunch of things about Sherry that I didn't know. I've learned a bunch of things from Sherry, and both of us consider ourselves experts in this thing that we're talking about. But that doesn't mean, and Sherry touched on this, you should consistently be learning. Sherry, I want to thank you truly from the bottom of my heart. This has just been an unbelievable hour. And I would highly recommend, as those of you listening, please go back and listen to this, because I can tell you there's great depth and there's so many seeds that she planted. And it might not sprout today, it might not sprout tomorrow, but if you consistently stay at this and review things like this, it will sprout at some point. Sherry, before we go, can you please share with the audience how they can get in touch with you if they'd like to bring you into their organization? Where can they find your books, those kinds of things?
You can find me at www.thewinningsleadershipcompany.com, thewinningsleadershipcompany.com. And any of those of you who are listening, here's what I'm going to offer you today. It's free, a 1 hour free session with me, so that you can discover like any of the challenges that you've had, so you can discover 3 takeaways that will help you get through those. And so when I say free, here's what I'm going to tell you. Here's the catch. Folks, if you choose to do this, and you go to my website, if you choose to do this, then your promise back to me is that you will promise to rant and rave about me to other associations, organizations, and people. So that's why it's free, because you're going to be my marketer. That's what you're going to do for me. So thank you.
Oh my gosh. And so now here's what I want all of you listening to understand. There's only one difference between people that are living the life of the dreams and the people that aren't. They make a choice and they take action. And so Sherry just gave you 60 minutes. And so let's do this just so to put this in perspective. Sherry, if I was to hire you, what's it cost for me to 60 minutes of your time?
It's $350 for 60 minutes.
So she just gave you $350. The question is, are you going to go to her website and take action, or are you going to think, yeah, I'll get to it some other day? I just put a quote on Facebook this morning that the road to someday leads to a town called nowhere. So I highly recommend, and I've built this podcast for you to take action, right? So Sherry's giving you an action to take. She's given you about 15 or 20 of them that were brilliant, but now she's giving you an action so you can call her and ask her and delve deeper into whatever she said that might have touched your heart or that you might have questions about. And the other thing that she said, call her up and say, hey, this is my stuff. And how can I get out of it? And she just said, I'm going to give you 3 things to do.
Thank you so much, Louie. This has been a lot of fun. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
I love you, Sherry. It was truly my pleasure. My pleasure. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks again for joining us and listening to this episode of Leadership and Love. I would like to challenge you to ask yourself, what's one thing that you heard today that you can implement immediately to improve your leadership and accelerate your growth? If you've gotten value out of this episode or learned something that you can implement today, we'd ask that you please share it with those that you care about. Our goal is to create more leaders who are leading with love.